Foolproof.com, and here on my YouTube channel, I share traditional recipes for making nutrient-dense foods using simple ingredients. And today, I'm going to show you how to make a sourdough, no-knead bread using my Foolproof sourdough starter. In an earlier video, I showed you how I made my Foolproof rye sourdough starter, and today that's what we're going to use to make our no-knead sourdough bread. And I'll link to that video so that you can see how to make this sourdough starter. Well, as I explained in the sourdough starter video, you take 2 tablespoons of your rye sourdough starter and you add it to a little bit of rye flour and a little bit of lukewarm water, and you make a sponge. You let it sit for between 6 to 10 hours and it'll foam up like this, and then it'll be ready to make your no-knead sourdough bread. And all we're going to do is use 4½ cups of bread flour. That's what I've got here, 4½ cups of bread flour, and it's just white flour. Any flour that you want to use is fine. This is organic, but it doesn't need to be. And then I have 1 tablespoon of sea salt, and I'm just going to put that right in there. And then I'm just going to take this and just use my tablespoon here a little to mix that salt up with the flour. And then I'm going to transfer this sponge into my bread flour. But before I do that, I'm going to take 2 tablespoons of this sponge and I'm going to add it to my little starter. The reason I like this method is because you don't wind up with a big amount of starter. You just have a little tiny bit of starter, which you use to make a sponge, which you then use for making your sourdough bread. And all you do is take 2 tablespoons of your sponge and add that to your starter, and then you can put that in the refrigerator. And this will stay fairly strong for about a week, which will allow you to make bread with this for about a week. If you leave it in your refrigerator longer, you will need to revive it. And I discussed that in the sourdough starter video. So I'm just going to put this lid on, and I'm going to put this aside, because I'll put that in the refrigerator later, and we'll get ready to make our no-knead bread. Well, the first thing that I'm going to do with clean hands, with a little flour flying out, I'm just going to make a little well, and I'm going to add in 2 cups of lukewarm water. And this is just filtered water, but I have left this out overnight to let the chlorine evaporate because I don't want that to interfere with the sourdough process. And then the next thing that I'm going to do is add in my sponge. And as I said, this is what you make using your sourdough starter, just 2 tablespoons of it, and you add it to 1/3 cup of rye flour and 1/3 cup of lukewarm water, and you just let it sit for about 6 to 10 hours, and it foams up beautifully. It's got a wonderful yeasty smell. And that's what you use to make your no-knead sourdough bread, or any sourdough bread for that matter. And the nice thing is, because it's a small amount, you're not going to get a rye flour taste. Now, I love rye bread, and I make it often, but for this, I'm just using, as I mentioned earlier, a plain white bread flour. And I'm just going to mix this in. And the nice thing is, if you want, you can do this with a mixer, but it really is, it's a no-knead, and it's going to come together quite quickly. At some point, I'm going to get in here probably and use my hand. But I'm just going to keep mixing this until I get all of the flour moistened, and then we'll move on to the next step. Well, I got everything mixed together. Took me under a minute to do. And remember, this is a no-knead bread, and they do tend to be a little stickier than regular breads that involve kneading. So if you need to flour your hand or add a little extra flour during the process, feel free to do so. That's fine. This came together nicely, so I didn't need to do it this time, but I have sometimes in the past. Depends on what the weather is and how much moisture there is and so on and so forth. You just kind of get the feel of it. Well, now what we're going to do is cover this bowl with some plastic wrap. And then we're going to put it to rest in a warm place, undisturbed, for about 6 to 8 hours. And it'll rise up beautifully, and then we'll be ready to go to the next step. Well, I've let my dough rise for about 8 hours. I had said 6 to 10 that it would take, and it seems to have doubled in bulk at about 8 hours. And now we'll just do the finger test. And perfect. What you're looking for is when you poke your fingers in, you don't want the holes to stay completely exactly like what they look like when you put your fingers in, but you also don't want it to completely collapse. You just want something that's in the middle. You put them in, it closes a little bit, then you know you're in good shape, but you can still see your finger marks, you know you're in good shape. Alrighty, well now what I'm going to do is I'm going to flour my board really well. And I'm just going to spread this all out, and I'm going to transfer my dough to this floured board, and I'll get ready to shape it into 2 loaves, and we'll go from there. Well, this is a beautiful, beautiful dough. Got it all out of the bowl, and now I'm going to put it right down on this floured surface, put my bowl down over here, and I'm just going to, it's a little sticky, you know, with the way these no-kneads can be, and we're just going to get this into a nice circle so that we can just eyeball it. And we're going to want to cut this into 2 because this is going to be for 2 loaves of bread. When I make sourdough, I like to do 2 loaves at a time. First of all, bread just goes quickly, especially when it's home baked. But also, if you're going to go to the work of, you know, making a sourdough starter and then the sponge and whatnot, it's just nice to do two loaves. So I'm going to split these in half, and then we'll get ready to shape them and make 2 lovely loaves of bread. Well, I've got these divided into 2 loaves, and now what I'm going to do is just work them to where I'm going to get them into a nice round shape. And we're just going to fold over like this. Nothing, you don't have to go anything fancy. There's no kneading involved. You know, these are the no-knead breads. So see, we're going to have that seam underneath there, but we just want to keep working it to get it into a nice little round shape. That's coming along beautifully. Yeah, just work it like that with your hands. It's a lovely dough. It's very easy to work with. Nice and soft. Okay, that looks good. Now I'm just going to move this one to the side over here onto the plastic wrap, and then I'm just going to work and get this one into a nice, we'll just do fold like that, and then back like that, and then we'll just work to get this one into a nice round shape as well. And working beautifully, and I'll just continue doing this. As you see, it goes pretty quickly. There's not a lot of work involved. Just getting it, you know, just put a little more flour on my hands. There we go. Just get that around. Just bring it towards you like that. Walk it kind of down your board. Helps get it into a nice round shape. There we go. And again, I'm going to just transfer this over to the plastic wrap, because what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this dish towel and I'm going to put this right onto my cutting board, and then I'm going to dust this with flour generously, because we don't want any of the bread sticking. But this cotton dish towel works very well for this next stage. Okay, then I'm just going to transfer my loaves back onto here, onto this cutting board, onto these floured cutting board that's covered with the floured, well-floured dish towel. Oh, look at this. They look beautiful. Oh, they're going to be delicious. I'm just going to move them, give them room to expand. Okay, now I'm going to get another dish towel. I'm going to put a little flour on top and get another dish towel, cover them, and let them rest. So I'm just going to put a little flour on the top. Give that a nice little dusting. I don't want anything, I don't want the dish towel that I'm going to cover them in when it's time to rest. Let me just do a little over here. Perfect. And now I'm going to cover them with this dish towel, and I'm going to let them rest about an hour or two, and then we'll put them in the oven and bake them, and before you know it, we'll have fresh bread. Well, I let my loaves rise for another hour. It can take 1 to 2 hours, but it's very warm in my home right now because we are in the middle of August and it's like 100 degrees outside, and so it's about 80 in my kitchen. So it only took about an hour for these to rise. They look terrific. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to actually use my pancake spatula. I'm going to transfer them from the cutting board onto, I'm going to put one each on a baking sheet that I've lined with parchment, and then I've dusted it with some flour. And I'm going to transfer one loaf to this baking sheet, and then I'll get ready to put some cuts on the top. Well, I've got this tool, it's called a lame, and it's like a little razor blade on a stick. It's very sharp, and I'm going to just make some cuts on the top of my loaf of bread. You can also use a very sharp knife, or you can let the loaf split naturally, but I don't always like to do that because I worry that it could cause some uneven baking. So, but I'm just going to do like this, and then over like this, just a little diamond pattern, and then over like this, and there we go. Perfect. Just maybe take a little bit of this flour that's on here. Just put a little on the top there. Alrighty, well, we're going to put this in the oven. It'll probably be ready in about 30 minutes. Oh, and I forgot to mention, I preheated my oven to 475 degrees Fahrenheit, and after I put the bread in the oven, I'm going to turn it down to 450 and let it bake for about 30 minutes. Well, I just took this beauty out of the oven, and it smells delicious, and it took just about 30 minutes. And I know that it's done because, let me just put these pot holders to the side. I picked it up, it's quite warm, but it sounds hollow on the bottom, so we're in good shape there. And I'm looking forward to it cooling off and enjoying a slice. But it's just delightful, and that's sourdough bread made with our rye starter and white bread flour. Well, this bread is still quite warm, and I should probably wait to slice it, but I'm just going to go ahead. I'm anxious to see how it looks inside and how it tastes. So I'm just going to give it a nice little cut here on the end. Oh, listen to that crust. Ah, it sounds like it's going to be delicious. Oh my goodness, look at this. Oh, it's so light. Oh, and the aroma is heavenly. Alrighty, it's quite hot, but I'm going to take a little taste. I don't know if you can see the steam is coming off of it. Oh, that is so good. It's got a nice flavor. It's not too sour. The crust is delightful, and yet the crumb is delightfully light. I'm going to give it another taste. Very good. I highly recommend this. Try making this as soon as you can. I think you'll really enjoy it. We've got the rye starter, the white bread flour. We use the rye starter to make the sponge, and then we use the sponge to make the bread with white bread flour, and it's just delightful. Lovely crumb. I highly recommend it. For the complete recipe for how to make this sourdough bread, please visit my website, marysnest.com. And if you like this video, I hope you'll give me a thumbs up and share it with your friends. And if you'd like to learn more about traditional foods cooking, please subscribe to my channel and be sure to click on the little notification bell below. That'll let you know every time I upload a new video. Well, that's all for today, but I want to thank you so much for joining me, and I look forward to having you join me again right here in my Texas Hill Country kitchen. Now I'm going to go finish this bread. It's delicious. Love and God bless. Hi sweet friends, I'm Mary from marysnest.com, and here on my YouTube channel I share traditional recipes for making nutrient-dense foods using simple ingredients. And today I'm going to show you how to make a sourdough no-knead bread using my Foolproof sourdough starter. In an earlier video, I showed you how I made my Foolproof rye sourdough starter, and today that's what we're going to use to make our no-knead sourdough bread. And I'll link to that video so that you can see how to make this sourdough starter. Well, as I explained in the sourdough starter video, you take 2 tablespoons of your rye sourdough starter and you add it to a little bit of rye flour and a little bit of lukewarm water, and you make a sponge. You let it sit for between 6 to 10 hours and it'll foam up like this, and then it'll be ready to make your no-knead sourdough bread. And all we're going to do is use 4½ cups of bread flour. That's what I've got here, 4½ cups of bread flour, and it's just white flour. Any flour that you want to use is fine. This is organic, but it doesn't need to be. And then I have 1 tablespoon of sea salt, and I'm just going to put that right in there. And then I'm just going to take this and just use my tablespoon here a little to mix that salt up with the flour.